Welcome to the podcast where we talk about all the things that are hidden in the shadows. This is Isaac.
And this is Megan.
And on this episode, that is not necessarily scary, but a lot of people will find it extremely scary if we talk about.
There might be some people that might skip out on this episode because we're diving into exorcisms and
Vatican files.
Kinda, yeah. More on like what the Vatican kind of has said about exorcisms. Specifically, one of the main exorcists for the Vatican, what he has kind of came out and said when he was alive. He's unfortunately like passed away in 2016, but kind of what his experiences and even experiences of the church that have been put out in like interviews, articles, stuff like that. Because I feel like, I don't know about everybody else, but I feel like from TikTok to YouTube interviews, stuff like that, a lot of exorcists that are part of the church now are definitely coming out and speaking about it. So I find it super interesting. And doing some research in this, I definitely found a lot of information. I was like, whoa, say what? And it's actual quoted. It came from their mouth.
Plus, we're going to talk about our own encounters with these demons.
Yeah, because I feel like we consistently talk about like the limits of what like an attachment or an entity could do, because we talk about haunted locations, we talk about houses being haunted, different paranormal creatures and stuff like that is different. But like I know one of our main things we talk about, coming from a paranormal investigation background and having abilities and stuff like that, we obviously come in contact with spirits, and we've talked about coming in contact with demonic stuff. But I think it's important to know, especially even if you're a paranormal investigator, going out there and knowing like the levels at which attachments can happen, because the best of people can get attached, like have attachments. Like there is plenty of cases where nuns had to be exorcised. There's plenty of cases where people that had abilities got taken over by something, and it's not necessarily like full-blown possessions like The Exorcist, but it's oppression. And we're going to kind of go into that in a couple cases. We're not going to really touch too much into the cases. We're going to kind of, sort of, because there's also people that have died from exorcisms, and I think that's a very important thing to bring up when you're talking about anything paranormal, because spirits and stuff are nice like to interact with and stuff, but once you start getting up the hierarchy to demonic stuff, that's... And you can have a negative attachment and not really be oppressed, but like, what's the difference, if that makes sense? What's the level it crosses, the boundary it crosses when it's like a serious situation? Yeah. So that's what we're going to be talking about. And the reason why we're talking about that, I think, other than that little explanation I gave, is you have a lot of movies coming out. You had the Pray for the Devil movie, which I think it was Bishop James Long that said it on TikTok that was one of the more accurate movies, because I think it kind of gets on our head, like, is Hollywood, when they make movies on possessions and stuff like that, are they exaggerating, like what? Because I know I've been around people that that was oppressed, but I've never physically been in front of somebody possessed, like full blown yet. So we don't know if that's something that's gonna happen in the future or what. I have been around people obviously with negative attachments. I've even been around people that are so far down like dark magic like holes, like stuff like that their energy is just really bad. So I've dealt with all that. And he said Pray for the Devil is one of the most, I think he said it in a TikTok, it was like one of the most accurate portrayals of what happens. And the storyline is meh, but the things that are talked about in there is pretty good if you guys just want to watch that. Kind of jump scary, kind of a little bit cartoony here and there, but like it's still a good movie. It's still got good quotes and stuff like that. And then another movie coming out, I think it's in April. I know it sparked a lot of people's interest. It's got Russell Crowe, and it's called The Pope's Exorcist. And it's about a guy that we're going to talk about today called Gabriele Amorth. Yeah, I'm Italian, and I was like, oh my god, I can't picture this. So, he, unfortunately, like I said, he died in 2016. But there was plenty of documentaries. He spoke a lot about like the stuff that he did. And he did, according to him, I gotta look back at my notes because I'm gonna go more in depth, but I'm speaking from the heart right now. No, I'm just kidding. Memory. But apparently he treated over 70,000 cases of demonic depression or possession. And the thing is, there's different stages of demonic possession, and I think there's even more stages of demonic possession, if that makes sense. You know, you have oppression, and there's another one that I didn't even know about that apparently is another form before it gets to like possession. Like basically where, okay, we always talk about the car analogy, right? Like possession is, oppression is kind of like you're getting, so imagine car is your vessel, you are the driver, and oppression is kind of like you're getting pushed into the passenger seat.
No, I would say more like the demon is like smacking you, trying to make you swerve off the road and
like
stuff like
both.
that.
Yeah, I
messing
feel like
with
both.
the buttons
yeah.
and stuff like that.
Yeah, and like a negative attachment is more like just messing up your car, right?
Somebody banging on the back of the outside of the car.
Yeah, like trying to mess you up, telling you to go off the wrong exit, like that kind of thing. But a possession is like you are no longer in control of the vehicle and you are locked inside the trunk. And for the exorcist, it has to come in, unlock the trunk, and put you back in the driver's seat and take that thing out. But he was saying that only like a smaller portion of them were like full-blown possessions. But over the years that he exorcised, basically he was nonstop. He worked 7 days a week doing these exorcisms, and I think one guy said that like it averaged out to one case a month nonstop, like just nonstop. So that's kind of interesting when you think about it, because you know I personally know, being in the Panera that's weird. Panera Bread community. No, I'm just kidding. In the paranormal community, a lot of times people say like, oh, I haven't even encountered a demon, so how? But to see numbers like that is kind of crazy. And that's one that he's one guy. It just makes you think about like how many possessed people there actually are. Now, like he said, a small portion of it is actual like full-blown possession. Sometimes it's just like darker things or things starting like oppression. Some of the things that he said that is interesting is he said one time it took 6 or 7 of his assistants to hold someone down, and that the person being exorcised choked up nails and shards of glass. That's what's insane, because how without swallowing it is it there? He was asked which this is another thing that I find interesting. He was asked in an interview with ABC News about whether the devil came into the Vatican. He said he already tried. He did it in 1981 by attacking John Paul II, which when you start diving into like the Vatican, apparently John Paul II was feared massively by demonic entities for whatever reason. I find that interesting.
Yeah.
Because
granted, I was only 2 years old, so
he rarely did like exorcisms too, which is interesting. By working with those who armed Ali Akna, and then there was also an attack on Christmas Eve night when a crazy woman pushed down Benedict XVI. So, I guess he's trying to get out of that. People were, I guess, influenced to do that. So yeah, he basically worked 7 days a week, 24 hours a day on an on-call schedule. So whenever anybody would have something, he was basically on call for all these things. But I want to go back. I kind of like went off, sorry. But kind of, for those listening, what is an exorcism, right? I mean, we kind of described it, but the actual definition is a religious or spiritual practice of evicting demons, jinns, or other malevolent spiritual entities from a person or an area that is believed to be possessed. Depending on spiritual belief of the exorcist, this may be done by causing the entity to swear an oath, perform an elaborate ritual, or simply by commanding it to depart in the name of a higher power. Spiritual possession, an unusual or altered state of consciousness and associated behaviors reportedly caused by the control of a human body by spirits, ghosts, demons. Spirit possession exists in Buddhism, Christianity, the Haitian cultures, Hinduism, Islam, Wicca, Southeastern Asian religions, African religions, and Native American traditions. And that's one of the things that we're going to talk about, because or on another episode, is kind of like the breakdown of exorcisms in other religions. Because I feel like obviously you hear the Roman Catholic Church is pretty much like superior when it comes to eradicating like demonic presence. So I know, me personally, I'm curious to find out these other religions, like how they get rid of it.
Yes, and one thing that's always kind of irritated with me when I've heard demonologists and Catholic priests, when they talk about exorcism and stuff like that from their point of view. Granted, if you ever listened to us from the beginning when we started out, we always said we were a paranormal podcast with a Christian point of view. That's not the case anymore. And a lot of things have led through our life to get to a point where now we consider ourselves more Nordic pagan, but in a form of spirituality, because we've seen a lot more. That we can't just say this is particularly one thing and that's it. There'll be an episode in the future probably talking about that, but not this one. But what irritates me about it is how they have heard demonologists and Catholic priests say that after you have been exorcised, you have to become Catholic or Christian or believe in God in order to prevent yourself from being a victim again. That's not true. It's not true in the least bit. Well, the reason why someone becomes possessed or even in levels oppressed is because we're dealing with depression, hatred, sadness of some kind, and the demon saw that and was like, ooh, that looks tasty. I'm going to, torment this person, break them down so I can possess their vessel. And then over time, it gets to that point where the person finally says, I give up, and then they allow the demon in, and then it takes over, and then you got to do the whole exorcism thing. But after the demon's gone, if the person goes back, gets, spiritual, and not say spiritual awakening, but basically gets back to a point of strengthening their will, understanding and stuff like that, knowing how to find peace in their life, there'll never be a victim ever again, because there'll never be a person able to be a victim ever again, because they have strengthened their will and their happiness and finding themselves. Finding the reasons and basically getting rid of the reasons what got them in the first place.
And I think that's, if somebody finds that in religion, right, or finds that in a specific religion, go for it. But it's not, which I am seeing some priests do say that our exorcists are saying now, more so now than ever, not like in the past, but there's a couple that I've seen so far in interviews that are starting to say, well, you just have to have some sort of faith. I don't care if it's Catholic, but the different stages. So in the actual Catholic Church, they have a couple of different words to describe basically situations going on. And one of them obviously is possession. And that is, they believe that Satan or demons take full possession of a person's body without their consent. Yes and no, because I that wording is kind of weird, because essentially with most demonic possessions, you have to invite them in. Like a vampire, you got to invite them in. And some people do that subconsciously. Some people do that consciously, by accident. Obviously, we've talked before not about the whole Ouija board thing, how you can invite things in and it's harmless. There's a story about, I was watching, I forgot which exorcist it is. I think his name, don't hold me to it, is Michael Lambert, I think. He's one of the main ones that are kind of going around doing interviews and podcasts talking about exorcisms and stuff like that. And he's part of the church. But he talked about somebody that he knew, a priest that he knew in New York. There was a girl who was trying to make it as a musician. She was talking to one of her friends about how oh my gosh, if I could just, like, she was saying this out loud, if I could just, I would just love to be rich and famous. I would love it. Love it, love it, love it. If I could just make music and tour, I would love it. I would do anything for that. And so apparently this girl had a dream, and in this dream there was a man that came to her, she said, extremely handsome.
No, to correct you, it was Father Dan Rehill. The story that's connected to this was a priest named Father Dan Rehill.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But she had a dream, and this guy was extremely good looking. And of course, I don't know if anybody's heard that quote, but the devil wears a suit and a tie. He's not going to specifically look like this creature thing from the abyss. Like, he's going to come looking sharp. But he came to her in a dream, and sometimes that happens. Came to her in a dream and was like, hey, I can make all your wildest dreams come true, but you got to let me in, sign this. So apparently in the dream, she cut her finger and signed this contract that this guy had with blood. And she woke up and she said that her finger was cut and there was ashes by the bed because the contract went up in ashes, right? And so she, of course, got everything she wanted. She was doing well on her music, was getting paid very well. Everything seemed to be going perfect. And then she started getting diagnosed with illness after illness. And I think it was AIDS at one point that essentially got her really bedridden. And she had told her mom the story, and I believe she was Filipino, so her mom immediately called the priest and came in, told the whole story, and apparently he instructed her that they need to, the creed that's in the Catholic faith. I mean, I was Catholic before, but I forgot what the actual name for it is, but it's a creed you say like to basically establish your faith, and she has to re-sign it with blood. And the doctor was like, yeah, we're not going to do that because nobody's cutting anything because she's sick with AIDS. Like, we're not doing this. The priest was like, this has to be done. You need to leave then. This needs to be done. And so the mom agreed, the daughter agreed, and the priest agreed. And so they did that. And apparently she flatlined. And when she flatlined, she basically came back. They ran blood test, no longer with AIDS. Yeah, it's almost like you have to, there's some way, either subconsciously or consciously, but basically by her having that dream and confirming, it's kind of like she let it in. And even with, I know we talked about before about Megan, how she had her exorcism, and eventually she's going to come on here and talk her story because I want everybody to hear it. She wants to tell it, so at some point she's going to come on and tell it. But Megan, on our paranormal team, we've talked about how she went through an exorcism. Some of the things she's told me about, like while she was being exorcised and stuff like that, is absolutely insane. Essentially, she got the invitation kind of happened for it to come into her was she had a dream, again, looked very, very handsome, and used one of her, not weakness, but essentially Mike was sick, and he used that to basically make his way in. Don't you want your husband to be cured? Nothing bad will happen to your husband if you do this. So, again, an invitation. She didn't actually go out and seek an invitation, but it came to her. That makes sense.
Yeah.
So that's something interesting. So, but like I was saying, the possession usually comes as a result of a person's actions. So something like that. Actions that led to an increased susceptibility. Another word that they kind of use is obsession, which I didn't know about this one. Sudden attacks of irrationally obsessive thoughts, usually culminating in suicidal ideation and what typically influences dreams. That's interesting. Oppression, which is no loss of consciousness or involuntary misfortunes in business, material possessions, family, and health. Now I'm going to say this. Not everybody that's going through like life stuff is oppressed.
Yeah.
It's just like when it just seems like, I don't know, you feel like something negative is attached to you, but sometimes that can even be negative energy. That could be hexing. That can be cursing. That could be... Which I didn't know the Catholic Church talks about curses too, by the way. There's a couple interviews that talked about that.
I mean, they should. It's something that they're essentially going to deal with when it comes to dark witches performing curses on people and stuff like that.
Because one priest was like, there was the question on TikTok, which I find it funny that they all are going to TikTok now. But one of the things that was asked was like, do witches have power and stuff like that? And they actually said, yeah, to a degree and all that stuff. And I was like, okay, well, that's interesting. In the Roman ritual, I guess, true demonic or satanic possession has been categorized since the Middle Ages by the following four typical characteristics. Manifestation of superhuman strength, speaking in tongues or languages that victims doesn't know, revelation of knowledge distant or hidden that the victim cannot know, blasphemous rage, obscene hand gestures, using profanity, and an aversion to holy symbols, names, and relics or places. Now, I will say, I've watched, especially preparation for this episode, if you've listened to the very beginning of our podcast, I was never able to do, is watch possession videos. And I have. And the thing I noticed for me as someone, like, it would immediately tell me somebody that's between somebody that has, because that's the one thing that the Catholic Church does do, is they bring in psychiatrists and they actually go through a long freaking like list of analyzing somebody to make sure it's not a mental illness. And there has been some priests that say some mental illness have been caused by something oppressing, but not all demonic possession, or not all mental illness is demonic possession, if that makes sense. But some kind of coincide together. Anyways, okay, but for me, the one thing that I noticed is the eyes. The eyes are different. On someone that's like mentally unstable, the look is different, the eyes. And for me, I don't know, eyes are very important, especially when I'm reading somebody or kind of getting something. Anybody that's around me that sees me read somebody will tell, I go off their eyes specifically. Looking at like demonic possession, like clips and stuff like that, it's the eyes. I can almost tell you immediately if somebody is possessed versus mental illness. It's a different vibe. It's a different energy. It's a different look.
Well, that's the thing with us, is that the oppression cases we have dealt with so far, we necessarily didn't need a psychiatrist or anybody on call or anything like that, because we have advantages versus anybody else, and with our abilities and stuff like that. So we can tell people off the bat, yeah or no. The second walking into a home, most of the time we don't even have to be there. You just remote view in, and I've via video chat with somebody, and we can already know from just doing that. So, but as there are advantages over everybody else. But when it comes to identifying it within, say, your friends or your family when someone's being oppressed, it's like out of nowhere. I mean, granted, they could have shown depression beforehand, or been sad about something, or, breaking will because of stress or over something, right? But nothing to the major level of what they have become. They've become a complete recluse. They don't want to associate with anybody. They're always lashing out for no specific reasons, angry over simplest things, extremely depressed or sad, and almost like they become an entirely different person. That's a big, giant sign. Whoa. Not saying that is idealistic, but if you throw that in with a bunch of paranormal shit happening in their home, kind of want to say they're being oppressed.
So one thing that I think, too, specifically that gets overlooked, because I guess they could say anybody could do this, but for me, one thing... So as a psychic, when I start channeling, right, I pace. It's inevitable. I pace. Sometimes I like move, like almost like erratic movement, but that's just me channeling. That's not me, like I'm not possessed or anything, but like that's just what I do. A person that doesn't have abilities, I feel like when they start doing that, that's also a sign. And they said a erratic like movement. If they start pacing and they start getting angry and they start pacing and they start like moving the hands in just a weird way, to me, that's not the main sign, but that would be a sign to me, because that means something is channeling through. And that's essentially how I feel like a demonic presence makes its way. Like a psychic obviously channels different beings, light and dark, but like somebody that doesn't have abilities, they wouldn't know what channeling is or feels like, and that's what it looks like. But like I said, going back to the priest, Gabriele Amorth, he was born in 1925 and died in September 2016. He was an Italian Catholic priest and exorcist of the Diocese of Rome, who claimed to have performed tens of thousands of exorcisms through his life. Amorth also, along with 5 other priests, founded the International Association of Exorcisms. Like I said earlier, in October 2000, it was reported he had performed over 50,000 exorcisms, which some of them led to several minutes to several hours. Catholic Church also talks about how sometimes people have to go through multiple exorcisms, and that it could take a few years to fully get everything eradicated. But apparently in March 2010, he said that the number had increased from 50,000 exorcisms to 70,000. Okay, so Amorth also said the following guidelines to those exercising the charism of exorcism: any such person must be highly regarded for his prayer life, faith, acts of clarity, and judgment. In addition, he must rely solely on the word of God or traditional prayer, be completely detached from monetary concerns, and profoundly humble and treasure obscurity. So obviously you're going to say that your faith is the faith that's going to eradicate everything. I don't entirely, I guess prayer maybe, yeah, that makes sense. And I do think like for him, or not for him, but for in general, obviously being spiritual in some form of aspect is going to help you get rid of these things. And then two, obviously, I know they've talked about, and even in like the Pray for the Devil movie, that basically you have to have your dirty laundry kind of like out there, because sometimes, and according to a lot of the exorcisms, not all the time, this doesn't happen all the time, but sometimes obviously if you have anything that you're kind of shamed of, depending on the level of the demonic entity, it'll bring it up. It'll bring it up. If you have something that you're ashamed of, guilty of, it'll bring it up. Like in the Pray for the Devil movie, it was the abortion of the nun that...
No.
What?
She never aborted the baby.
Oh, she didn't. She gave it away, right?
Yeah, she didn't know who the father was.
Okay, why did I think it was abortion? I don't know.
No.
Never mind.
Yeah.
Oh, she... Okay. But either way, you didn't love your mommy. You didn't love her.
No, you were so high on drugs, you don't know who the father is.
Yeah. And that's another thing is like the voices. It's kind of crazy. You'll have like I know one priest was recalling some of the stuff that they've seen, and one of it was that, a young boy was talking in such a low voice that wasn't even his, that made no sense. And if you see the Pope's exorcism trailer, it's that same way. The boy is like, "Get me the priest." That was really low. I'm sorry if I scared anybody. But apparently some of the things that Mr. Gabriele Amorth has said, Father, that he's seen somebody vomit metal the size of a human finger. He sees somebody vomit rose petals. And he says the exorcist guide is the scriptures and his tools are the prayers. And that the principal responsibility of the exorcist is to free man from the fear of the devil. Which I found this very odd. So apparently towards the later years, he apparently could even purge a demonic possession, which I'm sure wouldn't be the full-fledged, like, all the way possessed, bending weird and like growling and all that stuff yet. But he could do it through a Skype call, which I find that weird. I read that, I was like, say what?
That's what we do. But...
I mean, so yeah. But to be honest with you, on a possession case, I don't know if I'd feel... okay, doing
not
it
the first
remotely.
couples, but after I think I get a hang of it, I think I would be fine.
I don't know. Moritz said that he has seen different shocking behaviors from patients, and this is the crazy thing that I was like, oh snap, I would have never guessed that. That's interesting. So apparently spitting, that's one thing that occurs when a person is all the way kind of like, the demon is in there, they're exercising, and apparently he advises you have to watch out for spitting. And apparently, he did one time where a possessed person spit on him. 3 nails materialized in his mouth, and he spit them out. And he still has the nails. He also claims that his exorcism lasted about 30 minutes on average, and he would often conduct 5 over the course of a morning by appointment only, with breaks for paperwork. And like I said, he also did telephone and Skype calls apparently for exorcisms, which I find that so funny. Well, it's not funny, but you know what I mean. So one of the things that a tip he passed on was, with the whole spitting thing, was that basically he kept a handkerchief or a tissue in front of his face, and he would kind of over the years learn like when they were going to spit. Which I found that so bizarre. Like if that would, I feel like, because I have not seen that in front of my face, if that did happen, it would blow my mind. I'd be like, whoa, where'd the nails come from?
Yeah.
Because that's crazy, because that's an actual object out of nowhere. And it's, that freaks me out. Okay, so I found this also interesting. The Vatican first issued guidelines on exorcisms in 1614. Apparently, there was even some history that I found that you can go all the way back to hieroglyphics portraying exorcisms.
Was there some kind of like little tiny book or small tablet thing that was kind of etched in like a tablet? It was like real small. That basically gave, I guess, the formula, but at least the procedure in exorcisms, and it dates back to ancient Mesopotamia.
It's possible.
That's before Egypt.
Yeah, it's far back. And to think that this, apparently though, the Vatican revised their guidelines in 1999. And like I said, according to the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops, demonic possessions include superhuman strength. Obviously, like we said earlier in the episode, it took one time 6 grown people to hold down a young girl. I've never experienced it, so like I can't say, but apparently people have been thrown out of the way. And I think, if I remember correctly, didn't it take a lot of people to hold Megan down too, right?
Mike, Brandon, and another guy named Rob.
Yeah.
Which they were all of at least 200 pounds, and all for, around the height of from 6 foot to 5'10". So I mean, they weren't little dudes. And she's smaller than you.
Yeah, she's smaller than I am. Yeah. That's so crazy to me. And I think that's why a lot of times you see them being strapped in chairs and stuff like that. And that's why, but apparently aversion to holy water and the ability to speak in unknown languages. Actually, the Catholic Church, there was one interview I was watching where they actually say they go through a long kind of thing to prove if the person can speak in different languages or not. So if like you start other signs, obviously spitting, cursing, which cursing, not like cursing like you say, oh crap, oh no, I'm possessed. No. It's like that, you know what I'm saying? Like it's actual like cursing at the priest.
Shit.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. That was a little, yeah. But here's the thing is, unfortunately, as much as exorcisms have done good and eradicated things from people, there has also been really bad situations where the person has died. There's cases where even like some cases were terminal, even in the Roman Catholic Church. And there was cases where these are some that kind of like had a bad situation occur. It was basically terminal. Some of these are from the exorcisms by the church, but this could also be other religions. In 2003, an autistic 8-year-old boy in Milwaukee, Wisconsin was killed during an exorcism by church members who blamed an invading demon for his disability. In 2005, a young nun in Romania died at the hands of a priest during an exorcism after being bound to a cross, gagged, and left for days without food or water in an effort to expel the demons. And then on Christmas Day in 2010 in London, England, a 14-year-old boy named Christy Bamu was beaten and drowned to death by relatives trying to exorcise an evil spirit from the boy. And I think that's why the Catholic Church is so adamant about making sure that it's not a disability. It's not like there is actual demonic presence there. Because there was another case where there was a girl, I forgot what her name was. I think she was Nicaraguan, where the family was pretty much sure that she was possessed. The priest got it, not the priest. It was, well, I guess it was a priest, but it wasn't like associated with the Catholic Church. It was like a side religion thing because it was in the remote jungle in Nicaragua. But apparently he got the thing of lighting fire near her, and she fell into the fire and ended up dying. And then there is cases where the exorcisms, the people will die of, I think there was one, there was like suffocation that happened. The boy was being exorcised and it was suffocation. So irregardless, it's insane that somebody can die technically from that. I mean, those situations were kind of like people being not taking precautions like they should have. Okay, so we're gonna go over some cases. Hopefully one day in the future we'll go more in depth of these individual cases, but there was one case in 1949 of a boy. His name was Roland Doe. He was 13 years old and his name was changed to Roland Doe to protect his privacy, but he was mourning the loss of a beloved aunt. He began hearing and seeing strange things. As the possession worsened, he started getting super violent and had superhuman strength. His parents took him to St. Louis in 1949 for a weeks-long exorcism, and it's been known as the St. Louis exorcism, and it's basically also inspired the movie The Exorcist. The boy screamed and cursed and attacked his exorcist until, quote-unquote, a miracle occurred, and Roland came out of his trance-like state. The boy simply stated he's gone, and that was the end of the exorcism. And I noticed that like sometimes at the end of exorcisms, the person will say something like, he's gone, it's gone, or I'm relieved. In 1974, Michael Taylor, an Englishman, husband and father of 5, met 21-year-old pastor Marie Robinson. Frequent bouts of depression seemed to ease. Taylor believed it was due to Robinson's ability to exorcise demons plaguing him. After Taylor's wife confronted Taylor about a possible affair with Robinson, he physically attacked her. This led to an actual exorcism by 2 ministers that took place on October 5th, 1974. Some of the symptoms that Michael had was seizures, spitting and biting the exorcist, and screamed in tongues. Which I thought, what is tongues? He brutally murdered his wife. He wasn't convicted, however, because of the defense argument that the exorcism had made him insane. That's a scary thing about performing exorcisms, because what if the person dies? Like in the movie Pray for the Devil, spoiler alert, you know, the one person commits suicide, and sometimes that happens.
Several people die.
Yeah.
But then you ask me, like, if someone dies possessed, what happens to their soul? Same thing would happen to them if they died in a car accident.
You think so? Yeah.
Yeah, because the demon does not possess the soul, it possesses the vessel, the body. It has nothing to do with the soul. It traps it in the back. So if you were, say, in the trunk and you had a car accident and you died with a vehicle, essentially, you just go to where you go.
Okay, this one is 1990, The Exorcism of Gina. 1990, Reverend James LeBar oversaw 3 exorcisms, all sanctioned by the Archbishop. New York Cardinal John O'Connor and the Vatican. The exorcism of the Florida teenager, her name was Gina. It was televised on ABC Network in 1991. They had her strapped to a chair. She screamed and barked unintelligibly at the Reverend as the Reverend pressed a cross into her face. Told her supposed demons that if they wanted pain, he'd give it to them. Ultimately, it was antipsychotic drugs that gave Gina relief. Long story short, this person is definitely trying to say, like, a lot of the exorcisms can be that they're not exorcisms.
Now,
yeah,
our personal experience with similar cases in dealing with demons that we've had before. And if you've been following us for a long time now, listening to Shadow Walker series and other haunted updates we have done, then anything I'm about to tell you now is nothing new. A little bit. That's not a tantalizing teaser for anyone listening right now. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But if this is your first time listening to us, I'm about to blow your mind. Because me and you have seen, or at least what I have seen, encountering them, and you hearing them. All shapes, all sizes, all heights, all formalities, all types of textures, and the ones we've encountered, right? From the Cheshire Demon, which is what we have experienced 2 different versions of that. One, like, was a amoeba black cloud with a giant grin flowing through it, and the other was a Victorian style, I don't know, dapper guy, shadow figure kind of thing, but with a giant grin on his face, and this almost like a Cheshire Demon kind of thing. From a giant bull-like man to a skinny rock-shaped elemental kind of demon thing to one with horns kind of made a crescent moon on its head that both went opposite directions with designs in its faces. From dark entities with white eyes.
I also think it's interesting. One of them specifically had like branding on them.
Yes, and that one I think I took from a friend of a friend's place.
Yeah.
Yeah. Had a inverted pentagram branded on his, or scarred or branded on his chest.
Yeah.
Right? That one was very boisterous. Like, how dare you? Like that. Like, kind of talk to me like that. How dare you take me from that place? Kind of that mindset. And then, but all of them we've encountered always have the same perspective, is that they always talk a big game. And a lot of them can back up their words. Some don't. But a lot of them back up their words and stuff like that. But what I've come to find out is that everything that we've been told by the Catholic Church, or Christians in particular, is that only priests and only God and only Jesus have the power over these things to conquer them. But me, simple shaman, right, with an ability that's outlandish for most people to believe in. And I understand me talking about it turns some people off because it's hard to believe. And yes, I understand. Me talking about it is you can't believe. You can't take my word for it. You need proof. I would need proof if I heard it from any other source. My ability has to be experienced to be 100% believer as of now. Well, for the time being. But In the future, hopefully we gain some kind of footage so you actually can see it work in real time. But I have been able to take these things down. Some have been a little tougher than others, but so far my record is 28-0 against these things.
I think too, with anybody that it deals with the darkerness of the other side, you have to be a specific person. Like the priest always talks about, like, you have to have this and this and this and this. And I think that, I don't know, you have to be confident. You cannot show, what was it that you can't hesitate? No, it was something from Pray for the Devil, where it was like, you can't show, they show no mercy, they don't get tired, and they don't hesitate, or something like that.
Yeah.
And I think that's very true. Like, I have to give Isaac props. He doesn't show fear. He doesn't show hesitation. He goes at it. And I think essentially that's the priest. And like in the Pray for the Devil movie, you see like the priests that are there, and they're fresh priests. Like, they're just out of, I don't know what they call it. What is it? The Vatican school. Like when you become a priest, like you get
Exorcism school.
No, not the actual exorcism school. Like,
I don't know.
When you become a priest. And then you go to the exorcism school. But they were fresh, like like a military guy going in, like, just graduating boot camp. It's like they just graduated, like, priest academy or whatever it's called. And they go to this exorcism school, and they're like, whoa, this is not what I pictured it. Because I know there was another priest that was on an interview that was saying the deterioration of skin, the foaming of the mouth, all of that stuff, the smells, like, that is accurate. Like, it's not something can't have fear.
Well, the point I was trying to make is that even I, who is not a priest in the least bit,
Yeah.
and hasn't really trained to be a shaman, but everything I do is shamanistic-like, especially my ability, have been able to conquer these things, which will lead us into a future episode of how other faiths and other religions and other practices of the spiritual world have been able to conquer these things. And what it's basically saying is that Catholic priests and Christians essentially say they're the only ones who can conquer these things, when we know that's not true. We know that's not true. And people we've helped know that's not true. And if I can conquer these things, granted, my ability, but if I can conquer these things, I'm sure people out there with more teachings and more practices and more faith into what they believe can probably do the same as well.
Not saying everybody go out and go do an exorcism.
No, I'm not saying that.
No.
No.
Don't say that, because somebody even got like yeah, don't. We are not recommending.
Let me rephrase it better. I'm not saying an average person with similar faith and stuff like that. I'm saying if you're in Islam, you can ask whoever is the priest form of Islamic faith. Same goes for any other faiths in the world. Whoever is your holy man, your spiritual guider, your leader, your shaman, you would say, someone who has practiced in their faith to be knowledgeable of how to conquer these things. Go to that guy.
Yeah.
Right? Saying that if you're of a Hinduism and you have to go to a Catholic priest to get exorcism, not necessarily. You can go to your spiritual leader of your sect or your church or something like that, and he, if he's knowledgeable in the form, could probably perform it himself. But the point I was making is that not saying the other Catholic Church and Christians are the only ones who can do it is ignorant in a sense like that. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Reading a lot of the research and stuff like that, I don't know what I would do if I saw I know what I would do essentially. If I was in that type of situation, I would obviously be strong and not freak out or anything like that. Because I honestly don't. So how Isaac pulls, right? Mm. And he pulls the demonic stuff. I have the ability where I could, if I wanted to, and I have before. I know some psychics don't want to. They don't want to even attempt to talk to anything dark. But I am assured of my abilities where I know nothing's going to get me, in a sense. And then obviously my foolproof safety is that I have Isaac with me. So I know even more, if something were to try and attach to me, that Isaac could pull it away. But I've talked to these things, and that's the thing. They're very blunt. They're very much bullies. I know people like to say that they're not. And that they're...
That just reminded me of something. Mm-hmm. Speaking of what you were saying, mm-hmm. Tell what the demon said to you when we helped that guy, a friend of ours, who called us randomly about his person he randomly met at a convention. You channeled in just to see what was there. Mm-hmm. What did that demon say to you?
it started giving me images of, and it basically threatened me that if I go and I interfere and I try and stop it, that it was going to not only people that I loved, but it was going to go after my kids, because I don't really talk about like stuff like that much. Doing what we do, I had to basically say, no, you're not. You're not going to have that power. You don't have that power. So go ahead. Like, I basically, because I could easily have gone, oh, no, please don't. No, you know, and I didn't. And that's the thing with them is they're going to take things. Obviously that thing, when I channeled in, knew that I love my kids and stuff like that. Well, I say kids, I only have one, but they showed me multiple. Future children. Yeah. And basically it was telling me, it was like, I was going to miscarry a lot. It was going to make me miscarry if I intervene and stuff like that. Yeah, it was pretty bad. It was probably the worst encounter I've had. And I've talked to things that are demonic before, not like talk like, hey buddy, like, but when we're trying to remove something or help somebody and I had to channel in and it's there and I'm like, whoa, back up, you know? And if I didn't have that I would be in deep shit, I should say. And I feel like anytime we might have an oppression case, you just have to tune it out. And I think Megan's even had that, because one of the biggest things I think demonic entities try and do is intrusive thoughts as well. And that's why sometimes, unfortunately, when somebody is oppressed or oppressed or borderline possessed, they tend to have suicidal tendencies because that thing wants you to do that. And some people can be suicidal just to be suicidal. You know, they might have something that is causing that, and not every suicidal thing is a demonic thing affecting you. But what I'm saying is, like, demons are no hold bars. They don't give a crap how low they go. They'll give you the most twisted images, and you just, I guess anybody, I mean, a priest would have to do the same thing. They would have to consistently just barrel through and not listen to them.
Well, fear is the name of the game. And we are yet, I say yet, so never going to, I'm saying yet, have yet to deal with it in a full possession case. But us being us.
Yeah.
And I look forward to the day of testing myself against it. Because technically, in all sincerity, and I said this in every Shadow Walker episode, it is my final test.
Yeah.
To see if I can.
And I think one thing that the Pray for the Devil movie, I always refer to that movie, but I do think it had valuable points in it, is one of the girl, the nun, one of her things was while the priest was praying and basically getting control of the vehicle, getting the thing out, the girl was basically going in the back of the trunk and unlocking it and bringing the girl to the driver's seat. And I do think that has to be that. I don't know how many priests actually do that, but I feel like that is a really excellent battle plan when you're going against these things, that somebody is focused on the soul while the other person is focused on the entity. That makes sense.
Yeah.
So soul retrieval or something like that. Yeah. Which I think that's something else, honestly different, but that's what I would call it. I think that is something different. I think that's like when a part of your soul is, I don't know, but I would call it. I have a tendency of doing that, calling something that is something else, but I don't think it's that something, so I call it that something, but it's not that something.
What?
I bet you one person probably understood what I was saying.
Yeah.
But yeah, so soul retrieval I think is something else, but I would refer it to as like the person that basically goes for the soul of the person. Because like in the movie Pray for the Devil, she was like, come on, get back, get control, you're still there, like, come on.
Well, that was essentially one of our battle plans, is that while I'm working on the outside, you work on the inside.
I'm the trunk unlocker, I guess.
Well, that's a future Haunted Update episode.
Who knows?
That I guarantee a lot of people are going to look forward to. But it wraps us up here today.
Yeah.
What are we doing next week?
So next week is called Raw, the Law of One, which is a listener, Sydney. She has been asking us to cover this. It's a series of 106 conversations called Sessions between Don Elkins, who is a professor of physics and a UFO investigator, and Ra, who is speaking through Carla Record, I think. Raw states that it and they are a 6-density social memory complex that formed on Venus about 2.6 billion years ago. So a lot of the different talkings and sessions and stuff like that talks about different paranormal subjects, and we're just going to see where that goes and put our perspective on it. Yeah, so that should be an interesting one, and I know Sydney's going to enjoy it. So
I have a bonus episode interview I did with Dylan from Paranormal Thought, which is podcast. We talk. He honestly talks about the same thing we talk about, but he is more of an interview-based podcast. But not all of his episodes are interview-based, but a lot of them are about different perspectives, and he talks about people in the paranormal, alien abductions, and stuff in that kind of world, you say. So we kind of fit when we talked about stuff like that. And he does, in that episode, he does bring up one thing I've heard about, but never got the round perspective of it, about how owls are involved with alien abductions. Look forward to that episode. But as always, guys, you can catch our social media at Hidden Shadows Podcast on Instagram, Hidden the Shadows 6 on Twitter, Hidden the Podcast 2 on TikTok. Our links to all social media, and always you can listen to us at hiddenshadowspodcast.com. And as always, we'll catch your widows in the next one.
Yep.